So I've decided I'm going to start doing some more interviews with lesbians. And specifically, we're going to talk about what piqued them, trans peak, we're talking about. What got them realizing that the trans ideology, the trans movement, and the whole idea of trans, the whole T in the LGB, what got them to the point of thinking it's a bunch of bullshit? So our first guest is going to be Joss. We're friends. I've known her for a few years now, and we're going to talk to her about her trans peak moment or moments. All right, so welcome, Joss. Thank you for coming on my channel.
Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get into it.
So I work with LGBT Alliance USA. I'm one of the directors of the alliance, and yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing lately. That's just doing a lot of like LGBT activism,
Yeah,
which is a weird thing to be doing after coming out in the late '90s. Like I didn't think I would have to be doing activism, pro LGBT activism at this point,
the way we're doing it, right?
the way we're doing
Like
it.
back to basics. I was talking to someone the other day about how um well, I think I've talked to a few people. I've probably even mentioned this to you, talking about how like it's weird to have to go back and like work and talk with and be active with conservatives again because you guys find your well, now we find ourselves working on the same side sometimes. But also I feel like I have to go ahead and be a face again to say, hey, we're not all crazy. Hey, we're just normal people,
Yeah.
you know, because I do worry about the backlash from this for gay people.
Yeah. So was that, I mean, I found it really important to be visible.
Yeah.
As soon as I realized I was part of the homosexual community, like that I realized I was different in that way. I knew that I needed to be out and visible. And was that the same thing for you? Like I kind of wore it on my sleeve. Like people would mistake me because I had like my hair was long and in a ponytail for a long time. Like so they would mistake me as straight, and that would really irritate me. It really did. It bothered me a lot.
It was the ponytail. It was the ponytail that threw everybody off.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just being in Florida, and like it's just assumed that if you have like even because I was always never comfortable in like female like attire or whatever, so I wasn't like super femmy or anything. Never. But anyway, even as my hair got shorter, I would still get mistaken as straight, and that really annoyed me. So. But I would
Huh.
wear it on my sleeve. So any opportunity I had to talk about it, if somebody assumed that my girlfriend was my friend or whatever, like I would clarify, and I was the homosexual that people knew. Like I was the lesbian because I
I
wanted
think
them to.
I think I inspired to be that way. Like I saw other lesbians that I wanted to do that, but I at the time when I first came out, I think I had just well for most of my life I had way too much internalized homophobia to be that open. Like I was embarrassed a lot about being lesbian. So now I wear it on my sleeve though. Now I'm very visible because I'm like well because of all the shit I've been through. I'm like fuck it, I'm
Yeah.
here. This what we're going to talk about today is your trans peak moment. You're peaking when you finally were like, wait a minute here, because I think we all started. I think most of us started in kind of like either being like, whatever, or being supportive, right? Because I know I'm a voting Democrat, or well, I really haven't voted in a while, but I've been a voting Democrat my whole life. Consider myself progressive and yada yada yada, and part of the LGBT community. It became LGBT around 2001 or 2002 in my area.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you it's kind of the same thing. Were you
Yeah.
supportive at first?
Well, yeah, I mean we were told to. Like this
Yeah.
was the thing that this was the mantra that was coming from even though groups like HRC and GLAD and whatnot weren't they hadn't done what they've done since 2015, 2016, where they turned the tables and it's all trans activism. They were telling us, we were already getting that messaging that trans people have it the hardest. It's the trans community. We really need to support our sisters and brothers because it's so hard for them. And I found myself like trying to digest that and make that something that made sense to me, and it just didn't. Like it was always something that I was hearing, and even something that I found I repeated at one point, and then in retrospect I could look back and be like, but not. Like it's a very complicated thing, but it's not any harder to live with gender dysphoria or have issues with gender dysphoria or internalized homophobia and decide to present in a different way than it is to be a homosexual and face discrimination as a homosexual in this. Like it's not apples and oranges or whatever. Like these are I guess it is apples and oranges. It's not apples and apples. Whatever it is, it's like it's not.
It's a fruit. I don't know.
We're all fruits. Ultimately, is the thing I'm saying is that all homosexuals. But yeah, it was just it was yeah, the tea wasn't always there, and that's one of the things that really bothers me about this young generation and doing LGBT activism is how much I hear the tea was always there. Like they don't under these babies do not understand it wasn't even in the acronym at all.
No, but you know what the thing is? I think that people kind of know that, but what they're saying is, well, no, they weren't recognized, but they were always there. I think that's what they're saying.
Sometimes they're saying that, but
Yeah.
these when on social media, when the babies, and when I'm talking about babies, I'm talking about like 20 somethings and younger, because I am older, so I consider everything under a certain point in the 20s, they're all babies. I mean,
Yeah.
their brains aren't even formed all the way yet. No offense to you guys, but it's honestly
You all mushy brains. Sorry.
a little bit.
Until you hit about 25, it starts to solid up a little bit.
Yeah, it's all tough. But they will say the most insane things, like in the so it's not even that they weren't they're saying like, oh, the T weren't acknowledged. They're saying they were your forerunners. They were the ones that were out here doing all the labor, and y'all were just less resting on your laurels, taking all of the goodies that all the trans people were out there, acquiring for you. And I'm like, I suffered the slings and arrows of being in a very religiously conservative family, large family, huge family, very religiously involved, and being ostracized from family members, like for being an out lesbian.
Well,
But the
did,
younger
did
people
you
are.
did you have kind of like a peak moment, like an epiphany, like a oh wait a minute moment?
I did. I had, but so my peak moments, like, and I can't remember like when it started, but it was Reddit. So Reddit, um, I would kind of like just happen into Reddit sometimes. It wasn't something like I was a Reddit all the time kind of person. Like I had spits and spurts with Reddit. And one of the times that there were some lesbian subreddits there and what I noticed was it felt like there were less and less lesbians in the subreddits that were supposed to be for lesbians. But I went to this, I just jumped in one time and I said, so, I can't even remember what the conversation was because I deleted that account. Ultimately, I was so mad about all of it. I was just like, this is done. Um, where some baby told me, I said something like they were upset. It was Teespring. It was the Teespring thing. So there was a shirt that a trans activist wanted to make that said punch turfs or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they wanted to do it on Teespring, and Teespring initially I think allowed it, but then there was enough pushback that they took it off or something like that. And people were in this forum talking about how horrible it was that this person would be censored. They couldn't make this t-shirt. And I was like, first of all, what's terfs? Like that was the first time I'd ever encountered that word.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah. You got an introduction to something.
I got an introduction to, and so they told me what it was. And then
What did
I
they
was like,
say?
they probably said that, trans exclusionary radical feminist or something, whatever it was. Like
Okay.
I don't know. I just remember that was the first time I'd encountered the word, being told what the word was, then trying to think of like, like because I didn't even like I was not really getting any of it. And then I said, well, like it didn't make sense to me, like punch, like when I had to go look for also what the shirt was, like why would we want to advocate punching people, like, and so I was saying things like that, like why would you want to punch women? Like that
Why?
doesn't seem
Because
like a good
yeah,
t-shirt.
we're a little older, right? And I feel like old progressives was really against violence, right? It was like, no, you're not supposed to ever do the violence thing. It's nonviolent activism, right?
Yeah.
You don't you once you bring in violence, you're no better than them kind of thing. And so you're
Yes.
supposed to use, your logic, your words, your whatever you got to use, but not violence. That's something that's twisted in the progressive movement now too.
But is it the progressive movement? And I think that's a
Well,
different discussion
yeah,
for a different day, because that's
yes,
a big one. That's a big can of worms to jump into. But it doesn't feel very, because I am a lifelong progressive,
yeah,
liberal Democrat. So yeah, like for them to say punch, and I was just very naive, and I was like, why would you want to punch women? Why would
yeah.
that seems like a
Even if they
weird,
disagreed with you.
right? And so I said, well, like something like, surely, we can come together as a community. Like we're the LGBT community. We always, we're LGBT. I'm sure I said even T at that point. Well, why wouldn't we come together and like figure out how to work around this stuff? And they were like, oh, the LGBT community is fractured. And I was like, fractured? What? Like I'm in my little ho-hum existence over here with my partner of how 20 something years, or not even 20, like closing in on 20, I'm sure at that point. And like not engaging in being in the world and in community and seeing like, and when I did, I was still seeing those same engagements where you would rock up to somebody and like you'd know, like you'd have that moment where you meet eyes and you're like, that's family, and you would like acknowledge it in that way and say you fam, and like and then it was acknowledged like, yes, we are part of a family. And so that is the way our experience in our generation had with the community. And then to be told by the babies that the community is fractured really bothered me. And that was my first thing. And I was like, I don't like this. And I left Reddit for a little while. And then I ended up coming back into Reddit sometime later, maybe a year or two. And there is a whole story about a lesbian having the shit beat out of her at a bar by trans women for not for talking about not wanting to date trans women. And I was
Where
really
was
had a,
this?
oh, God bless.
United States?
Yeah, it was in the US. I want to say it was in the
Okay.
Northeast someplace.
Okay.
And so it was a story that was like making the rounds, and it was a topic. I just went into Reddit for
Yeah.
something else. These
Usually,
people were celebrating this lesbian getting her ass whooped. And I was just like, I'm like looking at the thing, and I'm like, the lesbian Reddit subreddit. This is one of the lesbian subreddits, and there's lesbians in here purportedly telling me that it's like a good thing that this lesbian got her ass whooped. And so then it was me and this other lesbian that were like, this ain't all right. Like you can't
mm-mm.
be talking about beating people, period, much less for not like wanting to like just talking to her friends and being overheard as saying that she wasn't interested in trans XYZ. Like that is insane that you would be rallying and supporting the ass whoopers and not the person who got her ass whooped. And and then like descended upon the two of us, everybody else in this lesbian subreddit. And so then we ended up talking, like separately about how insane this shit was. And then my formal education on all of these things started happening. So like, I think my first dalliance with it was probably 2018, because I was a heavy supporter of Liz Warren and her presidential bid for the 2020 election. And so I want to say that this probably was right 2019, somewhere in 2019, because in that point, while she was running for president, or just after it was made very clear we were going to just have to suffer Biden, um, that was where I really was coming to this like full grasp of what was happening in the community. And then I ended up over on Twitter, because then I was like, screw Reddit. And I wanted to see if anybody else was having the same weird experience where lesbian subreddits were not driven by lesbians anymore. And there was a lot of affirmation posts for males seeking approval from women about their appearance, or do they whatever, like, would you date me, whatever. Um, and so I ended up on Twitter, and that's when the J.K. Rowling thing happened as well, where I was
Oh.
just like, this was around the time that she took that first sling of shit, and she was like, there's a great like gif of Shaquille O'Neal like dodging anxiety and depression and whatever else. Like I have to find that gif. It's a great gif, and that's like she was just like dodging all of this nonsense from people slinging at her. So then it was on Twitter, and then that was like a formal education and what all of this stuff was. And I was like, okay, so the gay community is fractured because the trans community says so, and now there's no gay community anymore. What do we do? And that was my peakening. Is it peakening? Awakening? Peaking? Peakening.
Now, I thought I remember you telling a story about a guy identifying as trans in real life that you knew off Facebook or you were in contact with on Facebook.
Yes.
Where does that play into the peaking moment?
So the guy that I knew, I guess we do know each other. We know of
Yeah.
each other. We don't speak anymore. He was in my guild and he sought quite a lot of approval as he was doing this transition. He's like, I'm trans. Like, because we'll try to find people to play on it. There's a whole thing with World of Warcraft. It sucks. You have to have 20 people to run harder content, yada yada. So you have to recruit, you have to find people that will do this, and this is an older game, so it's hard to even find people that are still playing. Anyway, he comes through, a lot of ego, but says his name's April. All right, like I'm going with the whole thing. I have not had this peakening, whatever. I'm being very supportive. I'm like affirming, yeah, yeah, yeah. Get like everybody in the Discords everybody's cool, everybody's doing what they got to do. So he's not really engaged with the guild anymore. But the further I got into all of this, finally I was like, I gotta like come out again as gender critical because I'm doing this. Like this is what I'm doing all the time is talking about pro LGBT activism and trying to rebuild the LGBT community. I can't do that and then like be secretive about it, about the fact that I'm doing it. So I went to Facebook and I was like, I'm coming out as gender critical. I work with LGBT Alliance USA, and this is what's up. If you have a problem with it, let's talk about it. Because it was people getting canceled right, left, and center,
Yes.
and being silenced and shut down. And I was like, if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. I'm not here to like I don't just unfriend me and whatever. Let's talk about why. And here's some reasons why. And I had this really like I thought it was a pretty great post on Facebook. He did not think it was a great post on Facebook. and so he came through and he was like, the LGBT Alliance is right wing. The like he apparently was also probably like hate reading because he wasn't grasping like he was telling me about the LGBT Alliance, the organization I was helping run. And I was like, first of all, bro, like none of that. But anyway, so he was telling me all this stuff and that we're a hate group and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm telling you right now, like why I'm doing this and what the deal is. So anyway, we had some tit-tats back and forth, and he unfriended and blocked me, of course. And then subsequently, another so when all of this stuff was happening, as a like my hair is a little bit longer at this moment in time, but it's usually quite a bit shorter. And I've always been more masculine presenting, so like what I would call and what many of us in the generation called soft butch, right? So
Yeah.
I was a soft butch. I am like, and so one of the women, butch lesbians, who when she came out as trans, like I was like, yeah, all right, you're gonna change your name, cool. Like your wife is accepting of
This
it.
a friend of yours?
This is a friend of mine.
You
Yeah,
knew like, in the real world, right?
yeah, like we were hanging out. She told me
Okay.
in person, and in person, she said, so she was the girlfriend of one of my friends. Like that's how I knew her. And but we were friendly, and she had said at some point like you're the only person, like you're the only female that I can hang out with, or like you're the first female that I've really had as a friend. Like otherwise she only had male friends. And so sometime later she decided she was trans and started down that pathway. And she assumed also obviously that I too was trans. And
Even though knowing before you were not, or you did not identify
I
that
never
way.
talked about it. I never said anything
Oh,
about it. But
okay.
there were two lesbians, two friends of mine, both butch lesbians, around the same time, who did the same exact thing. They assumed, like they started this transition. Here I am, a soft butch lesbian. They assumed, obviously, I am trans as well because lesbian doesn't exist as a category, I guess, in life. I don't know exactly, but both of them assumed that I was also trans and were anticipating me to make this proclamation as well. And the second time it happened, I laughed. Like I laughed with that uncomfortable laugh of like, what in the fuck is happening right now? Like, I'm cool with supporting you and whatever it is that you're doing. How are you like, how are you making this assumption about me? What the fuck? I'm a lesbian. Like, no, I'm not, no. And I laughed and it probably maybe it was hurtful when I laughed, but I didn't know how else to respond because I was just like, how is this happening so often that
Yeah.
lesbians are transitioning and then assuming that other lesbians in their cadre, whatever, would also
Well, you know
just
why? Because they're transitioning because they think that their masculinity means they're really a guy. And so they're going to look at any woman who is not performing femininity to the hilt and go, oh, she must be a fucking guy too,
yeah,
especially if she's a lesbian. Right. So I think it's their own sexist bullshit that they're bringing into it.
yeah, yeah,
So it was two friends you had transitioned,
yes.
and this was around what year?
20 fifth 20 somewhere between 2015 and 2018.
Were
I'm
they
gonna
your same
ballpark it.
age?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
older.
No, yeah, right about the same age because the one was the girlfriend of a friend of mine. We were contemporaries, we were about the same age, so that would make her girlfriend also. And yeah, no, we were about the same age.
In your
And
30s,
yeah, at the
right?
point we were in our 30s, yeah.
See, I mean, the shit just like fucking lesbians of all age just seem to go down this. I mean, do you find that to be true? Do you find like a lot of lesbians went down this path, not just ones that are young
Yeah, yeah. It's not an age exclusive thing at all.
or
It,
lesbians at
for
least?
lesbians, yeah, for lesbians, it's not age exclusive. It seems like there's an incongruence with dealing with the way that we're perceived in the world. And I think that like for me and for a lot of women who have just balked at this is like knowing that we're different, being and like being okay with that. Because you have to have like as a homosexual, you have to have that moment where you're just like, yeah, I'm part of the other and that's okay. So like I recall being like mad at myself when I was a teenager because you'd hear shit about lesbians like or whatever. And I recall being on a family vacation and seeing someone so like a soft butch woman out there and being, like looking at her and just knowing like she's different. And I didn't know I wasn't out at that point. I had no idea. Like I was always I'm a gold star. I'm always a homosexual. I just didn't know it. Like I was in well and hiding on this with myself. But knowing like that she was different and that she was drawing the attention of people because she was different, more so then because this was probably like the early 90s or so. But like we know that we're other and you have
Yeah.
to be okay with that. And I think that for some of these women, especially in our age demographic, they're not comfortable with being that other. They would rather just fade into the background and let people perceive them as male rather than having those awkward experiences of being misgendered. Like I can't tell you how many times I got surd, even like I have large breasts, like even all of those things. Like I've been surd so many times. And then the first time it happened, it was awkward because I was standing like in a grocery line with my
Why is it always the grocery
brothers or something.
store?
I
It's
don't know.
always the fucking grocery store.
I don't know, but I was with some.
Every time I tell one of my misgendered stories, it's always in the fucking grocery store. And I
It's
think it's horrifying because usually it's always a line behind you, right?
yeah,
So then everybody gets to see this whole fucking awkward exchange that happens between like the checker and you.
yeah, because they look up and then they're like, "Oh," they
Oh,
hear your voice and they're like, "Oh," or whatever, and because they're just like, "Pow, pow, pow, pow," like
yeah.
it's kind of like Aldi, like they're just getting it through, like they're doing the fast check. But yeah, like so the first time it was weird. I had my younger, like one or both of my younger brothers with me, and but then subsequently, like it got less and less weird because it was just happening so much. And at a certain point, what is it called when you're like thrown into the fire and you have to learn to deal with it, like a
Oh,
like
it's like this sink or swim.
sink or swim, but there's like another name for it. Somebody might like probably come to somebody else, but it was like dealing with semi-traumatic things by forcing yourself to engage with them, like by just being out in the world.
Desensitizing yourself.
Yeah, it's a, what'd you say?
Like desensitizing yourself against
desensitizing.
women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, you're just like, well, whatever. So it's not a big deal anymore. And you just keep rolling with it. And it's whatever. But it's like for those women, they never get to that point. It's
Yeah.
always like that there's definitely for both of the women that I was friends with that trans and decided I was also trans, there was religious issues, and this is not like one was Christian, the other was Jewish, or like practicing, semi-practicing Judaism. So it's not like it's even isolated to one type of religion.
It's well, no, all religion. It's fair to say that
Yeah,
all religions pretty much teach against homosexuality,
right,
right? So that's just the way it fucking is, you know?
right. And then you have these parents, and so they were seeking their parental approval. Um, and the one mother was very accepting, the other would not. But there's still like this incongruence and internalized homophobia and not wanting to be other and wanting to whatever and feeling comfortable in men's clothes, like whatever, winky fingers because they're just clothes and whoever's wearing them, it's whatever it is. Like it's just I don't know. I can't imagine that it's easier to go through the process of transition than to just accept that you're gonna be a butch woman in the world.
It is easy.
Is
Sorry.
it? Well, I mean, like, but is it like?
Well, I think for some, well, for a lot of us, it does seem like it. It is. And that is how troubled I think many lesbians and many gay folks are about being homosexual and about just and you know what? The thing is most of us that transition have had like actual homophobic abuse, right? Oftentimes from our families and our communities. When I came out, I was completely ostracized out of my community, family, and everything. You cannot have, you cannot go through that and not have like deep trauma and scars from that need to be addressed in some way.
Yeah,
Because and or maybe you eventually come to terms with it and you're okay. But for me, I didn't, and I think one of the big reasons is because I already had so much like abuse and trauma in my past. Like I had no bandwidth to deal with anymore. So I just never could deal with it. And I didn't realize I needed to deal with it. That's the other thing. It's super sneaky.
yeah,
It's so subconscious, I think. Um, However, I think after going through the process, many of us realize that it actually isn't easier. It actually is causing us more damage. And for me, one of the big issues was I thought that I wanted to blend in. I thought I wanted to just disappear into the background, you know. But then when I did, I disappeared. And then I couldn't make connections with lesbians I saw. I lost that community. And even though I wasn't in the community, it still was a loss. And also having the loss of being a lesbian with my wife. Although we always were. I know that doesn't change anything, but being visible, being honest about it, instead of putting on this facade of heterosexuality, that was a huge like detriment and loss that I didn't expect. And I have seen, even when I was still trans identified, there was a lot of trans identified women who were previously lesbians who said the same thing. You can find it on YouTube. They were talking about it. I think it's a really common thing. And instead of us just shoving it down and pretending it doesn't exist, if you actually engaged with it, you'd realize, hey, maybe I'm living dishonest here,
yeah, yeah. I think so. Did you were you still considering yourself lesbians, like even while you're in the middle of transition, or because like for the one friend, her like they're soulmates. They really were destined to be together, and they had a separation of quite a long time, and they came back together. And I was like championing that. I was so happy for them to find each other. And when the one woman decided to transition, the other supported her completely. But she still, obviously, my friend was a lesbian. And she would talk about being a lesbian, but she would use, like, when they adopted a son, then it was, my, like, oh, such a great daddy. He's such a great daddy, and all of this stuff. And I wondered how that worked for her in the sense of like,
Are they
she's
still
still calling.
together?
I
Yeah.
don't do much on Facebook, but last
Yeah.
I checked, they were still together. And at this point, the child's got to be closing in on 6 or so, or maybe older. I don't even know. But
See, I
They,
don't I don't know how that plays out long term because for me, I mean, everything got worse because my mental health just got worse, and so like everything just imploded. uh, I don't know. I also think it depends how much one is forcing the other to go along with it. I've seen some women absolutely mandate that their partners not even mention or identify as themselves as lesbians anymore, that they have to be straight women and
yeah,
say they're straight. Now, I mean, that's so fucked up, right? I never went that far, although the requirements I did put on was still unacceptable and was still hurtful, right? Because to the public facing, we were heterosexual. And that was difficult for my wife to deal with. So yeah, I just it's not a healthy relationship. It's not a honest relationship.
yeah.
Also, I cringe when I hear kids brought into it. I'm like, oh God. It's like it's such a fucking bullshit lie to have your kids in.
I mean that this child was adopted with after post transition. Like the transition had begun. So
I know.
all this kid had ever known was the transitioned aspect of her. Like I'm not going to use names obviously.
Mhm.
But at last check, my friend, the lesbian, was still in my friends, but her partner who had made it for quite a while past my post, probably because I don't move through Facebook too much, was still there and then is no longer. So like at a certain point, the people who are super pro trans, a very small handful of people, they're like out of there. But it opened the door to have conversations with other friends, who like one of my friends uh messaged me and she said she has two sons that she was concerned about because they're both starting to identify as trans.
Jesus
And
Christ.
this is somebody who I was in school with for a long time. So it opened the door to have conversations also with people who were struggling and didn't, like, this is just a heterosexual woman. Like, what do you do with this? More or less. And I have a cousin that's in that same situation right now where his girlfriend is identifying as trans and he's not. He's not. But what does that make them? Are they a gay couple now? Like,
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
girlfriend who's just had a baby. Like, I don't know. It's so complicated and so unnecessarily
It's
complicated.
unnecessarily complicated. Yeah. I've seen many a woman or young woman get groomed into this by men,
Mhm.
but I've also seen men get pulled into this by women too, because it's a cult, right? So you're going to get pulled in all kinds of which ways.
Right, like the sex of the individual doesn't matter when you're, because we've heard these stories over and over and over again of in lesbians situations of one transitioning and then the other one calling herself a non-binary
Yeah.
because it's part of like the support package of whatever, like,
I mean, well,
well,
we've
my
seen it.
girlfriend's trans, so I'm non-binary now.
I mean,
Like,
we've just seen it in the larger lesbian community overall, right? You've seen like one go and then the next and the next and the next, and pretty soon everybody's fucking doing something.
yeah,
The ones that want to stay, I think the ones that still want to kind of stay in the group but don't really want to do anything, they claim non-binary, right? Because they're still in the in group, but they don't have to actually,
yeah, they're not going to
do
get
it
super pissed
themselves.
off if you don't they them. They'll, they're
I mean,
just
I
throwing
think
it
I think
on.
some are easier about it than others. Some really buy into it, but I do see some that just kind of like do it to kind of go along and not cause waves.
I think that's kind of generational because I feel like there's a lot of millennials that will
Yeah,
do the he, they, or she, they, whatever to go along to get along. Like,
yeah.
because it does in that way get them as part of the group without being really firmly attached to any of it. Like, they don't have to
Mhm.
do anything. They can just put that as their pronouns. Like, yeah, I'm a they.
Well, I mean, you see a lot of straight people do that shit too. I mean, that's just
That's what I mean. Like it doesn't even matter.
yeah,
But like there's a thing, there's it seems to be at least a thing for me when I'm looking at different, like when people send us comments, I look at the profile of the person that's sending it. So I'm looking at age and I'm looking at like kind of background. And it comes really from two different sources generally. It's like super progressive, often a little bit older, like millennial or young millennial, older, whatever is Z or whatever, or super young conservative. So like we're talking haven't graduated high school yet, extremely religiously conservative background. We get the old school homophobia from that crew, and then we get the new school homophobia from the other crew. But either way, it's homophobia that's directed at us. And
And I'm curious, when did it strike you that that it's homophobia? Right? Because now we see just how much homophobia there is in the whole fucking trans ideology, trans movement. When did it hit you that you're like, oh,
when I was in Reddit and they were saying, yeah, like that
okay.
lesbian needed to get her ass whooped, then I was like, holy shit, this doesn't
Right,
feel good.
because you're like, well, obviously a lesbian isn't going to want to be with a trans woman. It's a fucking dude,
Right.
you know?
And from my place of this, like my side of the street was also like, why would you put hands on someone, especially a woman, period, and have other people say, yeah, that was justified. No, that trans woman shouldn't have gotten, any kind of repercussions, or it's good that there were no real repercussions. Like,
No, I
how
know.
do you take that perspective? Like, that was the thing that was just like the fact that they were so ready to go to blows, like physical engagement over words or how someone feels or
Yeah.
identifies or whatever. Like, that to me made it feel like an assault
It was an
on
assault. It is an assault.
it is an actual assault, but it made it feel like it was a full scale assault on the LGBT community. And even if you wanted to say LGBT community, like it was a full scale assault on destruction of the community, and it has been effective because
Yeah.
now they're right. It is fractured. And now we're trying to put the pieces back together for the homosexual and
But
bisexual
when
side
you
of the
say
street.
fractured, you mean fractured within homosexual community.
Right. Yeah, like
Because
when
it
when
is, because there's a ton that are very supportive of it and there's some that aren't. I don't know what the split is, to be quite honest, because I think a lot know it's bullshit but don't want to say anything.
they're scared.
Yeah.
They know when they take to Facebook and they say something even remotely, then it's not just gonna be like the homosexuals or people from the community that are going to have something to say to them. It's also these straight people. This is the thing that is really bothersome to me about how pervasive trans activism has gotten, is that I have had, my girlfriend has had heterosexual people explain the homosexual community to us.
Yeah.
They're the ones to take up for trans activists, and I'm just like, what dog do you have in this pony show? Like, what is the deal here that you're gonna tell me like that I need to the NPR is doing, like we say NPR is doing too many like pro trans agenda things, and you're gonna be like, it's not enough, or it's because there's so many kids dying, or whatever. We're in Florida, so that's a whole don't say gay propaganda nonsense. Like, it was never about gay. Like, if there might have been a line in it that was stricken out right away about gay. It was really about not teaching gender identity in schools. But then you have like my contemporary progressive liberals saying, "Oh yeah, well, but the trans people, bro, but the trans people."
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Trans is a thing totally its own, right? Because you can be heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and identify as trans.
Hmm.
That's an identity. That's a identity you just bought into, an ideology you bought into, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why does that need to be put in with people who are, you know, gay or bisexual? So you found it was really important once you were peaked, once you realized this is some bullshit. You just seem to go full force into it and go, okay, boom, I'm in. I am going to be visible. I'm going to fight back against that. Like, where did that wanting to fight back come from? Because you definitely came out swinging
Yeah, it came
with
out to me.
like, oh no, I'm going to fight back.
I the I have because I've been out for such a long time and know like how important it has been to me to have the gay community to like have its arms open and grasp me. Like, all
Mm-hmm.
those pivotal experiences I had of like the first time going to the lesbian bar, or going to pride events and whatever else, and those really positive experiences, I realized if there's a whole community of people who have infiltrated my community, torn it asunder, spat it out, says it's dead. And now what happens for the babies when they're trying to come out to that same community? There are no gay bars anymore. There are no lesbian bars. Certainly there's no lesbian bars. There are still some holdout gay bars, but there are no lesbian bars. There's no opportunity for having that same experience that I got to have when I was coming out and coming to terms with who I was.
Or
So what
even
does that
or
mean?
even I was thinking even situations where there's not bars, but say you had a LGBT community center, right? We used to have one here. Now it's LGBT, or actually the biggest center we have is what's it called? Gender something or other. It's some stupid fucking gender name, but like it's not, so like even not being able to have the community or groups, having a lesbian softball team or kickball or whatever the fuck they're going to do, or even being able to have groups where it's just lesbians or gay men who having groups. We're not even allowed to do that. I couldn't set up a group in my local area and say, no, this is for lesbians only, and hold that line. I
Yeah.
would get completely thrown out. I couldn't be at the center.
Yeah. Those bars, those things that try to do it, they have to call themselves queer.
Yeah.
And that's just basically an open door to everything at that point. Like, so yeah, it's I understand why those things don't exist at this point, but they did. Like there was a lesbian coffee house over on Tampa side we would go to called Sacred Grounds. It was a great place. Like it was right on top of Ybor. Like there's a lot of gay stuff that would a lot of lesbian stuff that would happen. I saw Melissa Ferrick over at Ybor City singing at one of the bars over there. Like there's just so much culture that we had in such a short stint of like, and you could go out to these places and see a lot of homosexuals, a lot of lesbians, and it like there's something brilliant. And I saw actually like a TikTok or a reel or something of a lesbian like being out and being like, that's a lesbian and that's a lesbian, like, and
Mm-hmm.
like there's that feeling that you get that you even mentioned, like feeling like you missed out on when you're in the middle of transition, that you lost that sense of lesbian community even when
Yeah.
you're not
When
actively
you're not
in the
in it.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still, you like, it's that same identification I made when I was a teenager, and I was like, that woman's other, she's different.
Mm-hmm. I,
And
I remember having one of the things that stuck out to me as I was already, you know, transitioned or whatever, had the full beard, no tits and everything. I was in college, and I had a instructor that was a lesbian. I knew she was a lesbian, and I was happy to see her, and I wanted to make that connection with her. I mean, I liked her. I wanted to sit down and talk with her about philosophy for hours. She was a philosophy instructor, but I couldn't really make that connection because I was presenting as some dude, although I'm sure she knew I wasn't. But still, there's that separation. And I think that's so sad, especially when you are such a minority, you are such othered anyways. You're just othering yourself further.
yeah, yeah,
I guess
yeah,
the reason I brought up the community center versus the bars is because I know when we were young, it came out, there was still online wasn't like it is now, with no social media and stuff like that, right? So you still had real brick and mortar establishments that you went to. And maybe that's not where we're at now as a society because so many things are online, but there still exist community centers, right? There still exist places like support groups or even just craft groups or whatever you want to. I know locally there is a uh was it kickball or something, kind of a group for queer women, and it's all trans inclusive as well, so it's for fucking everybody, but so things like that, right? Places where young women who are coming out can still go and get hooked into the community, right? Get plugged in to where there's other lesbians they can be around and find. And what's the reason we do this? Well, because first of all, we want to be in a group with our own. Second part is we want to find love and we want to have some sex too. And we want to find women, right? You can't just walk up to any old woman and say, "Hey, you want to go on a date?" It doesn't fucking work for us, right?
yeah, yeah,
In my day, you might get your fucking ass handed to you if you did that by the woman if she was ghetto enough, or by her boyfriend who was hanging around somewhere. Either way, you couldn't do that. So you needed a real safe space, people. a real safe space where you weren't going to be fucking beat up or killed to approach other women. And that's such the important thing. I mean, I know you probably hear it too. You hear it from young women, young lesbians just going, I can't, it's so hard to find anybody to date.
Yeah.
The date life is just fucking non-existent.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
That pisses me off. Oh, that pisses me off.
We had bookstores.
Uh-huh.
There's all kinds of different ways that we could engage with the community, see other homosexuals, other people in the world, and have those nuanced engagements. Like, and the fact that it doesn't exist, it is hard. Like, I think of bars because of there were a lot of bars
Yeah, I mean, bars
in
was the
the
thing. Yeah.
yeah, in the late 90s and early 2000s. There were actually quite a few lesbian bars here in the Orlando area, but certainly in Tampa as well. And we had the Watermark. Like, the Watermark has got a whole trans award thing now. Like, it's just like all of these different groups have absolutely like closed their eyes when it comes to LGB and focus on TQ to such an extent that it ostracizes now an already ostracized community. So there is no physical spaces for lesbians to meet each other, for gay men to meet each other necessarily, maybe not to the same extent as it is for lesbians, because there are still gay bars. Like, there's still ways that gay men can meet each other.
Well, also, gay men are men, and men have a, first of all, men generally will respect other men when they say no. So they're not going to get the shit from the ones that are really pushing. And also, women will still listen to men when men say no. So the trans men, oftentimes the gay men will just fucking ignore them or tell them to fuck off, and they will. So gay men can hold their boundaries easier.
Yeah.
Women, however,
Physically for sure.
both, yes, both physically, and I think just, our culture empowers males more than it does empower females to draw boundaries. So they just do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the like, it kind of got my mom the other day thinking about being a parent, being a woman, giving birth, this thing with my cousin and his girlfriend, because she just had a child not all that long ago, and like how disrespectful it is to womanhood
Mhm.
to just then identify as male as a
Identify with
mother.
it.
Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
then to me, like, what is happening for the babies, like what are her children actually receiving as messaging there? But um yeah, like, the lack of space is really important, and that was a driving force. But just being so the fact that they were on Reddit, they were so keyed in about the violence. Like, in the
Yeah.
one situation, it was promoting that t-shirt that was saying punch turfs, and the other, it was a discussion about a woman actually getting her shit beat, and they were all cool about it. And then to go over to Twitter and see so much vitriol, and seeing so much vitriol coming from leftists, because I was heavily vested in the Warren campaign, which had some boundaries with the Sanders campaign. And I have to say, no offense to Sanders people, but there were a lot of extreme left, so far extreme left that it was very much like right at this point, and a
Right.
lot of misogyny, and it was untethered because they were so rabid in there. Like, I was a rabid Warren supporter. I love Warren. I absolutely love Liz Warren. But these dudes, especially the males, would be so aggressive in how much they hated Liz Warren, because Liz was the progressive female counterpart to Bernie Sanders. So, like, seeing that coming over to Twitter and seeing how much hatred was being directed at women from men who were also extremely pro-trans, and it
Mm-hmm.
just, none of it made sense to me. Like, how are you advocating for this thing, but also hating on women so much? Like, it just was so, it made my brain hurt to try to make it make sense. I couldn't make it make sense. And so the more I started looking for what is a solution to this, because I must like, things make me angry.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me want to take action. Where I'm not angry, I'm just like, whatever, okay. But I was mad about the loss of community.
You had to do something. You had to put it
I had
somewhere.
to do something. And I was
Yeah.
mad about watching these bros like tear apart anybody, like all of the female candidates, but especially Liz Warren, like, and then to be so also pro-trans and anti-JK Rowling, and then so all of these things kind of like dominoed themselves into finding the UK group had talked about, was anybody in the US interested in an LGBT Alliance US? And so that's where I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely interested in what can I do to make things better here.
Yeah.
When
What do you think about when you run across other gay people who are defending the trans stuff and propping it up? Like,
I think it goes one of two ways. It's either people who are entrenched in whatever this I'm gonna say is a community, whatever it is now, this queer thing. They're entrenched in it, they're profiting off of it some kind of way, or otherwise are going along to get along, or they just don't know. It's one of two things. They're either so deep in it, they drank so much of the Kool-Aid that they're are puking the Kool-Aid onto everybody else, or they haven't had any because they're
or they're
maybe
ignorant of it.
yeah, they're maybe an older lesbian couple who's been together forever and
Mhm.
hasn't been out in the world. It
Yeah.
hasn't had to try to date or do any of those things that would thrust them back into trying to find their community and hang out with other people, and then realizing, oh shit, there's nobody to hang out with because everybody's trans now and or queer or whatever. Like the a lot of us would go and meet at the Unitarian Universalist Church, or like something like that. That was
Mhm.
like the gay accepting church in the early 2000s, and now it's so pro-trans that it's difficult. Like I'm hearing from lesbians, it's difficult to engage in those communities as well because they're ostracized immediately if they
Because
question.
they put gender over the reality of sex, and you can't do that if you're gay. Like, if you're homosexual, it's about same-sex attraction. It is, and you cannot do away with that, or else you're telling people you're mandating people, have sex with someone they don't wanna have sex with, pretty much,
You're
you know?
mandating by like basically this mandates bisexuality
Yes.
ultimately.
Oh, yes. I mean,
And the thing that our heterosexual sisters and brothers need to like really get their heads around is that lesbians tend to be the target because there's a lot of males who choose to identify as lesbians and choose to identify like have their gender woo nonsense, but the the coin goes both ways, like the table flips both sides, like whatever the sayings are, like this is also true for heterosexuals. And the more that like it happens to lesbians, the more it's going to start happening with the heterosexual community as well. Of what do you
I don't know
do?
if I don't think it's gonna affect them. It doesn't affect them that much, though, because there's so many more of them. Your strength in numbers. I think if there's so they have so many more choices, right? They can play nice and avoid the fucking dude in a dress.
No,
Whereas us, like, we have such a small group that, like, if we're at a mixture of 30 lesbians and the fucking AGP dude comes in, you know, dolled up in his dress and his makeup and his bullshit, that impacts us a whole lot more.
that is absolutely fair. There is a show that we watched with my mom recently, and it's one of those like reality type dating whatever's. I don't know what it's called. But in this particular, it's like people dating at a from a like across borders or something, what have you. I don't know. But this particular segment that we watched was a man being like chewed up and spit out by a bunch of women because he didn't want to get married to a trans woman because he wanted children. Like at some point, there has to stop being a blanket. Like you can't say that she's not woman enough for you, or you can't like
Yeah, I know what
basically
you're
all of it.
saying. I
Yeah,
know what
like
you're saying.
they're going like multiple women were tearing apart this dude, um who was like in Moldova or some shit. And my mom was explaining later, like he had dated this dude, this trans woman before the transition. So perhaps he's really gay. He can't talk about being gay because he's
Mhm.
from Moldova and he'll get,
Yeah.
messed up. And so he doesn't want to be with the trans, whatever it is, like it's an I've had enough hearing from heterosexual people, like telling other people like this is okay. Like women have to stop making excuses for this.
Yeah.
Women have to stop putting men who identify as women on the same playing field, because you're right, it's not necessarily going to be men, because men can say no and men can whatever, but it's also heterosexual women. Like, I have a lot of compassion for heterosexual women and the stuff they have to deal with, but also at that, like, one of our Warren events was a heterosexual woman who we were just talking at, like, a pro Orlando thing, and she came with a trans identified husband, trans woman. He was just starting transition or whatever, just starting to identify. And as soon as this dude walked away, she was just like, oh my God. Like, there are going to be so many heterosexual women who are dealing with this as well.
Oh, well, yeah, from the dude side of it,
Yeah.
definitely. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we
From the
already see.
AGP side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you already see. I mean, trans widows is a fucking thing. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um, no, I know what you're saying, and it's true. It's like if the ideology alone is left to take over, it is going to fuck everybody over because
Everybody.
no one's pretty much. There are bisexuals, and if they're okay with it, great. But even most bisexuals don't want to be with someone who is altering their body medically to be this weird half and half place. Like, most people just don't dig that, you know? I
Yeah.
think there was a study a while ago done that showed that, and boy, that got a lot of hate, and a lot of people were all up in arms about it. It's like, well, it's the truth.
I would want to see
Those
that study.
I tried to track it down again. It was kind of a thing a few years ago, and it was going around on Twitter, and people were the gender criticals were giggling about it, like, yeah, I told you, no one wants to date you, weirdos. Like, stop it.
Yeah. We've had
Like,
bisexual volunteers that, yeah, that was their thing.
well,
Like, they,
because and honestly, the bisexuals are the ones that get it first. Because you're bisexual, you're supposed to be okay with whatever. It's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way.
mm-mm.
I remember in a online place. Well, it was online, but it was a like Facebook, so it was local people talking about something, and it was this bisexual guy who was getting pressured into dating trans identified women, and he was like, "I am not interested. You're bisexual." Blah, 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 blah. He's like, yeah, I am, but I want to date men who are men, just men, or women, not this weird in between place. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in a woman who's taking testosterone. I'm not interested in a woman who's cut her tit off. Like, I'm just not interested. And why aren't people just respecting that? That's the other question. The whole problem with the LGBT. Honestly, the T's the problem because the T has mandated that everybody else go along with what they believe instead of having mutual respect.
Hmm.
If you just respected each other's spaces and each other's sexuality and likes and dislikes, it would be fine. So it's not so much that you're identifying this weird ideology, it's the fact that you are mandating everybody else believe it too, which is, by the way, very, very unprogressive of you.
Hmm.
Like, you're supposed to respect people's beliefs and boundaries.
Yeah.
At
And
least I
that,
thought that's what it was.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. That is the core difference between LGB and TQIA, is that we're we're acknowledging our existence in the world is going to be different from
Yeah,
heterosexuals, and we're not saying you have to accept us as heterosexuals, just leave us be. Like,
exactly.
I don't,
I wanted the whole point of gay rights was just, please stop arresting us, firing us, kicking the shit out of us in jails when we're, put in prison or jail, and just allow
denying
us to live our
opportunity.
lives.
Yeah, don't.
Just denied kicked out of housing. Just let us fucking live our lives. That was the whole point. It wasn't, hey everybody, you're all really gay too, so you should be open to marrying whoever whatever gay person approaches you. Straight dude? No. No, no straight dude. You don't get to be straight. If a gay man approaches you, it's homophobic if you don't say, "Oh, okay, I'm gay too. Go on a date with me."
Yeah,
Which is what the T is doing, right? That's exactly what they're doing. They're like, "Oh, you all have to believe the way we do about sex." And it's
yeah,
like,
it's very culty.
it is like, it's just another I call it, I think it's the progressive religion. It's become the progressives' religion because people always go back to religion for some reason. People love religion.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't understand it, but
I I I think that what I'm excited about, I've heard of a leftist group that's coming out. So LGBT Alliance is not we do not have a political affiliation
Yeah.
whatsoever, even if we do personally have political affiliations. I'm excited to see more leftists speaking out
Yes.
because it it isn't progressive. And I think that those of us that have that incongruence, like me, we are here because we know that these are not progressive values. These are very sexist, very binary, ultimately,
Hmm.
ways of thinking. This is not gender play like what we experienced in the 90s and the early 2000s, whatever.
Yeah.
There's no gender fluidity in that. Like there was gender fluidity in Boy George, and there was gender fluidity in a lot of people, stars and whatnot, in the those time
Maybe
frames.
the 90s, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something else, and it's not progressive. It is absolutely not progressive. It's crazy.
Also, as an old school, like I well, you know, we've been called, I've seen online the old, oh, they're the old school liberals, they're the old school progressives. But as the old school progressive, weren't we supposed to be suspicious of corporate power? Weren't we supposed to be suspicious of money?
We are.
Of the medical industry, of industry, period. This is an industry. This is a fucking medical industry. How do you not see that you were being medicalized for the money?
It's the most capitalist capitalism that ever
Totally.
capitalist in the whole capitalism world. Like
Yeah, like
it's nuts. Yes, we are supposed. This is my incongruence with HRC. Like, don't come at me and just want to fundraise. Like, what are you going to do to make things better? That's progressivism. Progressivism is getting in and getting dirty and getting it done for the people first. Screw the
yeah,
corporation. This stuff, this gender stuff,
yeah.
it was a long game by people with money to keep people with money and power and generating more money and more money and more money.
So,
So
hey,
a
follow the
woman,
money. If you want to know where anything goes in the United States, just follow the money. It's always been that fucking way.
yeah, a,
Always been that way.
a woman who needs a medical procedure like a breast reduction to relieve back pain or whatever else can't get it. So you have gender issues, you can get it, whatever
Absolutely.
you need,
I was just talking
whatever you
about this
need.
in a chat. I was like, y'all, if you need any kind of medical stuff, just try to link it into gender. Just say you're non-binary. Well, you know, because like just the recent interview I did with Beth Bourne. Here she is, a woman in her early 50s, over email, all over email and through Zoom. Never went in once to see a fucking doctor or therapist in person. And in like 6 months, had all the okay to have had to have a phalloplasty, her breasts removed, and everything, the whole 9 yards.
A phalloplasty too.
Yes, and actually she got prescribed tea within several days of telling her doctor, just out of the blue, out of the blue. She's been, you know, she's, like I said, she's a 50-some-year-old woman, had kids
Wow.
and everything. Out of the blue, tells her gynecologist, I am non-binary. The gynecologist is like, great, I'll change all your records now within like a day. And then she says, I think I want to start tea. All right, here you go. Um, and then she says she wants a phalloplasty. She wants the breast off. Got that okay. Went the phalloplasty. Got that okay. But then she said, well, I want the phalloplasty. And they're like, well, you're not taking any testosterone. She's like, I don't want to take testosterone. I'm non-binary. I just want the top to match the bottom. Okay. You should watch the interview if you haven't yet.
Wow. I will. I
How
will.
dare you not watch my interviews?
I have the article saved to read as well. I haven't read the article yet. I have both.
It's actually a rather short interview. It's only like 45 minutes. So,
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, that is.
but yeah, that shit was just, that's where we're at.
And,
That's where we're at.
I think that there are doctors too. Like I've tried to broach the subject with my various doctors, PCP, the endocrinologist, gynecologist, like all of it, and they're just like, it's like they're in a room with rattlesnakes, and they're, how do I get out of this room? Like they do not want to talk about this
Gender stuff.
at all. Gender stuff, yeah. Like
Like,
if you're asking,
what have you tried to say?
like I remember specifically asking my endocrinologist because I have slightly high testosterone,
Mhm.
like, and we've been working on balancing my, and when you have slightly imbalanced hormones, like I have thyroid conditions that so we're working to try to balance this stuff. And so I had said something about, like testosterone, or like the levels of things, or what happens if XYZ with kids taking medication, and you're just like, shoom, and that was a 180 back to my health stuff. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's complicated, and
not gonna
shoom,
talk
like,
about it. Yeah.
right, yeah, because they can't. They don't want to get canceled. They don't want to get shut down. They don't want somebody like secret
Yeah.
sneaking reporting on them to whatever, to
Do you
the
know what I did
trans.
when the WPATH files came out, the leaks? You
What?
know, you saw that, right? The
Yeah, yeah,
WPATH
yeah.
leaks. Okay. So when that whole thing came out and the report came out, I sent it to all my doctors at Kaiser. Yeah, I sent it all to my doctors and I said, I want you guys to be aware of this. I was impacted by this quote unquote trans healthcare. If you don't know already, my psychiatrist knows, but everybody got it. I think I only got a response from my psychiatrist who's like, thanks for sending me this. You should, because you know how crazy I am. You must acknowledge me. No. But yeah, I think it's important to, you know what? I told everybody, I said, send this to your doctors if you can. I mean, Kaiser's good that way where you can just email your doctor. Fucking do it. Send them this
Yeah.
shit. At
I have
least
an
put it on
appointment.
their radar,
I have an appointment with my endocrinologist next week, so maybe I'll take it with me.
right? You're
And
like, you should be aware of this as an endocrinologist.
she's
Whatever
super
you do
cool.
with that information.
I like
Final
her a lot.
thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts? I often wonder, I want to start doing these because I kind of want to push back. I don't know. I guess I wanted to offer maybe other lesbians that are on the fence or other lesbians that are kind of seeing this thing. I want to offer the proof that, like, look, there's a lot of us who see this and we think it's bullshit. We think it's harmful. It's okay to say no.
Yeah. I
So
think
kind of what's your thought on that?
that's the perfect final thought, because it's okay to say no. Women are socialized to say yes. We are socialized. Like, I don't care if you agree with me. I'm just gonna tell you, this is real. Like, women are socialized to be compliant and to say yes. And that's why it's hurtful, even that weirdo television show where those women were attacking a man for not affirming the gender identity of a trans-identified male. we are we are meant to be everyone's savior. We're meant to be
Yeah.
everyone's shield for all of the bad in the world, and there's only so much of that that we can take on. And one of the things I think young women in particular, they're not empowered to their own agency of their body, of their experience, of their time. People need to stop wasting our time. Even if we didn't talk about anything else, it is a waste of our time and opportunity to hand over these things to men willingly, and not just willingly, but with like, oh, how could I do it any better? Like, how can I genuflect and give more of myself to make this experience better for my sister? Like, these are not your sisters. Stand up for your actual sister.
Mhm.
Like, stand up for other women, stand up for other lesbians, and know that our experience in the world is unique. It is not harder for trans identified people than it is for homosexuals and bisexuals in this world, in same-sex oriented relationships, to still, it may be even more so now than it was when I first started coming out in the late 90s, to walk this world. The situation then felt bad because it was conservative homophobia by and large, and we gained a lot of acceptance. And now all of that work that we've done as a community over decades and decades for gains have been lost. And now we're handing them over, and we have to stop handing them over. We have to stand in solidarity with each other and rebuild a community that is desperately needing to be rebuilt because the babies, the 20 somethings, the teens that are coming up and are just understanding themselves, they're not being told, like, you can't be gay. They're being told being with a man who identifies as a woman is gay. It's a different kind of pernicious homophobia that is gaslighting to their experience as homosexuals in this world, and that's not all right. So, yeah, it
All
makes
right.
me
So
real
thank
mad.
you for joining me. Thanks for having this conversation. Maybe we'll have more conversations because I think you're full of great information. Okay, plug your side of things.
LGBT Alliance USA is my plug. So it's
Yeah.
lgbausa.org. Um, we host a lot of events during the month,
Yeah.
so you can come to a bunch of different meetings with us and talk about things, difficult topics. Our LGBT discussions, difficult topics. We have a book club. Lavender Scares, our next one that's coming up next week. So you can listen to
I
that on
do love
Audible.
the discussions, and I wish I could get to more, but like Sundays are always it's always something going on for me Sundays. It's so hard.
We just did one last night. Like the
I
days are
know.
kind of being weird. We're all over the place on the discussions group, so it's
Oh, I
not.
guess maybe I'm thinking of the lesbian social.
Yeah, lesbian
I try to
socials on
go to the
Sundays.
lesbian social, but it's always on Sundays, and I always usually have like a bunch of Zooms that are scheduled on Sunday, and I have to pick which one am I going to do this week.
Yeah, yeah. So just check the calendar, the upcoming events. It's where we have all of our events listed and a lot of different things to engage with. But we appreciate all the support we can get in the community because it's
Absolutely.
we're getting it from both sides. So
All right.
it's
Stick
yeah,
together. All right. Thank
solidarity.
you.
Thank you.